Good morning and welcome to one and all. On behalf of SJK Foundation and ICS, I welcome you all for the 60-second virtual webinar of Sadgun Sam. We continue with our topic Food Hygiene and Food Safety series. Our topic for today is pest control, which shall be taken up by Mr. by question and answer session. Cleanliness and hygiene has been embedded into the Indian culture since the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro times. Cleanliness is equally important when it comes to food and its preparation. Cooking, though a clumsy and multitask-oriented process, needs to be carefully handled to ensure that the resulting product is palatable and contains no foreign material. Food safety and food hygiene are important as they ensure that the food you handle and produce is safe for consumption. Food safety is the foundation of trust in the food business. Entrepreneurs can establish a good reputation built on food safety and quality and derive profit. Small and medium-sized businesses very often do not realize that not applying food safety and quality improvement measures turns out to be more expensive than applying them. In this regard, while hindsight may be good, foresight is better. This means not leaving this important element to chance or ignoring it, but to actively and alertly plan, implement, and pursue food safety from the initial stage of production, inputs, processing, packaging, storing, and distribution. Let's quickly go through the agenda. It starts with the inauguration, virtual inauguration by Dr. Sundar Kataria. We seek these blessings of deity, chanting of Gayatri Mantra, introduction of the speaker, presentation by the keynote speaker, Mr. Sumit Saxena, introduction of the panelist, panel discuss and question and answer session, and we close this session. Sadgun Sangh, conceived and led by Dr. Sundar Kataria, driven with a mission to elevate the quality, safety, and environmental awareness levels of industry. Sadgun Sangh is a series of educative, informative events aiming to illuminate professionals on possible solutions to current issues of industry and economy. A brief introduction of Dr. Sundar Kataria. He is the Chairman and Managing Director of International Certification Services Private Limited. He's done his Mechanical Engineer, AMIE. He's also an honorary doctorate in Business Management. He started his career in building India's first nuclear power plant at Rawalpindi, Kota, Rajasthan. He contributed in developing India's first oil and gas field at Bombay High since its inception. He was head of the industry and offshore development with DNV for 2 decades. He is the founder of first Indian conformity assessment and inspection body known as International Certification Services Private Limited, which is a provider of a total quality solution under a single umbrella with wide spectrum of services. He has received Lifetime Achievement Award from NACE Corcon and also received national and international awards. I now request Dr. Kataria to virtually inaugurate this session.
आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
Please join us for the recitation of Gayatri Mantra. A brief introduction of our keynote speaker, Mr. Sumit Saxena. He is the head of Global Operations, Maven Quality Assurance Council. He's done his BTech honors in food technology. He has completed his ISO 22000 lead auditor training. He's done his master trainer for FOSTAC. He has 12 years of experience in food industry. He has done around 500 man days of audit in food manufacturing, retail, and catering industries. He has done around 10,000 man hours, all for international certification programs with 100% passing participants and more than 75% of merits. He's been awarded by Equinox Labs on contribution to food safety on the entire industry in Pan-India Survey of Organizations, Individuals and NPOs in June 2017. Please put your hands for Sumit Saxena. Over to you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Mounty. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and grateful and quite honored to have been considered and given this opportunity to share my experiences today with all of you. Um, if I could be given the rights to share my screen, Mansi.
Yes, sir.
And Mansi, could you confirm, please, if I'm audible to you and if my...
Yes, sir. Loud and clear, sir.
Very well. Thank you so much. And also, I believe you would be able to see the screen properly.
Yes, sir.
Very well. It was a great start. It was a great start to the morning. And just one thing which I wanted to share, that as you were introducing the session, we did make we quote somebody saying that do cooking is a clumsy but a formidably commendable act. So yes, that's true, and I believe that organizations and individuals like us and you are the ones who are going to lead in making this activity less clumsy and more productive for everybody to enjoy and savor the health out of it. Very well. A very good morning to all of you. Namaskar, and wishing you all a great health and safety, most importantly during this era. And such sessions and particularly such topics and titles in such sessions are very, very important during this era, where in the industry we are supposed to understand not only what is the regulatory or the statutory requirement of maintaining hygiene. By maintaining hygiene, I mean it's important for us to establish it, and then to sustainably maintain it, so that not only our workforce is safe and healthy, but also we fulfill the obligation that we have towards the masses of selling food for a commercial purpose. So that's a big social and moral obligation that every food producer and everybody in the food business has. So today's session on pest control basically is more coordinated towards its significance to food hygiene and food safety. That is, what is the requirement, what is the inclusiveness of pest control operations in the food industry and various segments of the industry. So without any further ado, I would love to share my slides with you. Now, we often tend to understand the benefits, advantages and disadvantages of pest control, but I believe standing in the early 2022, it will be needless to explain, because in the past few years, it's not only an industrial practice, but you will find a good pest controlling reaching every household. There have been various aggregating organizations like The one I know is one company, and the others which are extensively into providing a good pest control to even domestic purposes. And uh, this activity of using chemicals and techniques and tactics for controlling pests has reached every household. It is just not the off the shelf and off the counter chemicals or aerosol cans, or the cakes and the stuff that were being used earlier. It's a complete process of pest control which even houses implement with them. So I think today it's less important to discuss in the forums about the advantages and disadvantages, because it has seeped into us in our activities now completely. Though it is important to understand that apart from the hygiene and the health that we understand, it is important to also understand pest control as a function, or an activity, or a departmentally controlled and monitored function, because it also poses a lot of financial threat to the businesses. Okay, now what happens is, it's not only the health and the hygiene and the food that is getting disrupted, but also it has been found that largely the pests in an industry are also causing a lot of acid damage. Okay, so by acid damage, I mean the property basically. And the incest of these the pests is not only from the periphery or surrounding or the activities that you have within the premises. It has been found largely that a lot of a greater percentage of the pests that can be found in a particular premises can also result in from all the external activities that are taken around and about a particular business's premises. Uh, uh, just to understand the scope, it is very important for us to understand also that when you talk about pests, there could be any organism, can be a pest, and at the same time, an organization's surrounding or its environment calling a certain organism as a pest may not be a pest for some other setup of an organization. So as to explain that, we call even people pests. That is just to understand that it's sometimes a subjective term, and it has to be studied. It has to be studied. It has to study the geography, topography, demography, and also, the nature and characteristics of the environment of a place and the criticality of those organisms to the product to call a particular organism as a pest. All right. So generally, what the pests that we understand are insects. Uh, and largely, if I can actually categorize, they are actually called as vectors and scalars or crawlers. So any pest which will be a vertebrate, or which will have legs on them and they crawl on the surfaces like the rodents or lizards, they are called as crawlers or vectors, scalars. And any pest that can fly, okay, will be called as a vector. So all these mosquitoes and flies, these are called as spiders. Spiders will crawl, sorry. So they can actually categorize, and that is how we call them scalars and vectors. And if you talk about the larger category for understanding the movement and the characteristics, you can call them as insects. And the insects-like organisms like mites, ticks, and spiders, weeds, and vertebrates. So when we talking about the food industry on a whole, we have to understand that it is not only a manufacturing industry or a retail area or a catering institute, like a hotel or something, but also the huge implication of a good or a poor pest control is, it also lies on the crop fields and in the farms. And that is exactly where the biggest concern of the industry comes in, because at the farms and the crops, when you want to eradicate pests, you're using insecticides and pesticides, and to a certain level where they can actually be toxic, for through the water and the food to the consumers. So we also categorize weeds and any other plants and insects which could be pests for the crops. As I had mentioned, most organisms are not pests. A species may be a pest in some situations and may not be in others. Now, I I would request all of you to please mute yourselves. All right. Should you have any questions, we'll be having an open forum for the questions later on. Um, I gave you one category of pests, which was based on the movement and the mobility, basically, of the pests. But there's other way of categorizing pests to understand their habits, okay, and habitat. So there are continuous pests that are always present in a particular area and require regular control. All right. So this could be things like mosquitoes and flies. Migratory or cyclical pests could be those which are present occasionally or intermittently. So when you hear or you come to know about a place which gets infested by roaches only in a certain time period, or a kind of mites at a certain time period, let's say monsoon, then they would be called as migratory cyclic pests. Okay, and in some cases they could be also monkeys or birds, that you can call off. Even snakes to a certain extent. Potential pests that do not require control under normal conditions, but in other conditions, let's say like less of heat and high moisture, darkness, they become a little more active, and such conditions have to be controlled. Then they are called as potential pests. Talking about the four major group of pests that we can discuss today, will be the most important destructive pest, uh, you know, and why do I call it as most destructive is because the other three categories that we are going to look at, the birds or the flies and mosquitoes and the rodents, they are externally present in the premises, in the facility, and could be identified, could be controlled, could be prevented. But these are the pests which are present within the product and will be difficult to identify unless the product is exposed. All right. And there are times when the products are not exposed for the reason of hygiene and food safety in automatic plants, like for grains and wheat grains for atta plants. And there are a majority of situations where the product is directly fed into the process lines, and it comes out as a final product. So in such cases, if you have stored pests, they become most destructive because you're not able to identify, but they are there and they do their work. All right. So the few examples of these stored product pests, as we call them as SPPs, there will be moths, like the Indian meal moth. I will show you a few pictures. I have beetles and weevils and mites. And mites have been a major cause of the destruction of tobacco leaves, and fruits also. I will want to show you these the photographs of these pests first. So these are how this is how they look. So the first one is the Indian meal moth, and the second one are the beetles, which are in flower and grain, sorry. And the next one that you see is in magnified view of these on a grain particularly. Then you have again these beetles and moths which are seen on the bird seed. All right. So where do you basically find them? You can find them in food and you can find them in packaging. In the food, it is There are times when the season changes. Like, I mean, I can tell you it rained yesterday in Jaipur very heavily. So, and it's like almost the middle of or end of January, which never used to happen long ago. So the seasons are changing, the weather is changing, climate is changing. So similarly, I mean, there are times when, there are seasonal changes, or sometimes there are failures to control the environment, or a modified environment within a factory for the storage of the wheat grains and the raw material or the ingredients. All right. So what happens is, I mean, when you are providing these pests or these organisms a more likely environment to survive, grow, and to breed, then they start growing within the product, because there are organisms which would need these carbohydrates and proteins from the product to grow and breed. So that's what they get with the complete moisture and darkness and that cozy atmosphere, in airtight packed bags. And this is where they start growing. All right. And you'll find them in seed bags and nut bags and spices, grains, etc. Also in tea, and it's very difficult to identify these in tea. um, there are chances that in this complete cycle of the stored pest, starting from an egg, breaking of the egg case to have a larva, the pupa, and the adult pest as an insect, all these could be present in a particular in a bag of raw material, because it's a complete life cycle. It takes time, and during that storage time, this development can take place. Also, you can find these pests in packaging, because see, finally, the packaging material is also made out of cellulose. Okay, if it's not plastic, and cardboards and corrugated cartons and all these, they have this nutrition that some of these pests can savor to grow and breed. On the other hand, the plastics may not provide nutrition, but they can provide a moist and dark situation for these eggs and larvae to grow and breed. So if these packaging areas and these lots are, in godowns where the moisture and the sunlight and, I'm to say, illumination, and the environment is not controlled, then there are certain chances that they may grow even in the packaging material. Um, Now the problem is that not only do they extract the nutrition from these grains or cellulose from the packaging material to grow, but also, uh, hence, they will lead these materials to lose or deteriorate their physical and chemical properties. And certainly, it is needless to explain that once this happens, they will be, no longer a good quality product to be used for processing. However, also on the other hand, not only would they spoil the material, but also there's a lot of clogging and coagulation or lumping that will happen with the raw material and the ingredients, which can actually also make your machine suffer, because your machine needs to have your ribbon blenders, etc. I'm giving you an example to understand. So they need free space around these powdered products or these grainy products to move. And if you have a huge lump of the grain or partially done flour, and because of the clogging of these stored pests inside them, then there are certain chances that these blenders stop working or they malfunction. So that this is the point where I was talking about. Apart from the product loss, they also can cause you property and asset losses. Um, the signs to find out the evidences or incidences of product pests, stored product pests, will be when you check these the raw material. You will find that there will be damages in the products. There will be holes, or there will be grooves made in the nuts or the grains. You can find incidences of the life cycle of these pests, like you can find eggs or egg cases, you can find larvae, or you can find these cocooning or webbing in some grains. Okay, so what happens is there's a sort of camouflage. So if we have students and who are checking, who are studying about testing of raw material, etc. So it's a good thing for them to understand that any a cocooning of these stored pests can camouflage some grains like barley and also dark in color. So that's something very important for quality assurance departments to do and check. um, you'll find webbing or cocooning even outside the bags because of the breeding and growing of these pests within the product. They will perspire, so it will certainly result in some kind of moisture evidences building around the bags also. So that's also something which is a very important evidence of that there is a stored pest, product pest inside. Um, Also, if in case you have these glue marks of the labels and stickers on the bags, you will certainly find that there will be these incidences or these evidences of these insects sticking onto those glue products. I showed you some of these pests. Now, this is not a normal pest control here. So for the pests that you find within the products, growing from within the nutrition of the products, you need to be very careful, much more careful than the other pest controlling methods that are possible or available. Why? Because over here the product is exposed. You have to encounter these pests from within the product. So you will have to choose something wherein the product is also not harmed, and you are certainly able to kill these pests or eradicate the evidences of these pests. So in this case, it is very important, and where exactly this is being done, where you have huge go downs, you have huge storage areas or transportation where the conditions of the storage may change. So basically, the most important thing that we all have to understand is that the stored product pest will actually grow only in the situation where the storage is the prima facie cause or the reason of these pests growing. All right. And so the parts of the supply chain where this is possible are, if you can understand the logistics, that is the transportation, because if you look at the consignments of imports, they keep standing on the ports and for a long time till the entire quality assurance has been enforced and assessed, evaluated to be correct. This entire container, it keeps standing till an assurance is met. In go downs where you dump tons and tons of raw material in terms of grains and all, which are susceptible to such stored pest control, stored pests, it takes weeks to months at times for these to be used. Okay, depending upon the safety characteristics of these raw material, it takes that much time. So these are the circumstances where these product pests get their way out into the products. So a term called as fumigation, which is many a times very wrongly used by some sections of this industry, is the only option that can help you with the eradication of the product pests. Now, fumigation is an activity which is very risky, because over here there are explosives being used in a highly regulated quantity, and a very monitored, highly monitored situation. So if you can see over here in the picture, this is how I would say, I would not say this is the best situation, but this is how it is generally done. The entire stack of the raw material is being covered with plastics, which will ensure that the explosion of this chemical would not be outside of this containment, with proper labeling of this material and the data fumigation. So fumigation basically is the um, you know uh, the fume that will come out of the explosion of a certain chemical compound. Okay, so there are these examples like the phosphine and methyl bromide. There used to be aluminum phosphate also, which is no longer being used, or it's been seldom used because of its safety. um, Methyl bromide is being used these days, and also we have other methods coming up. You know, there are new innovations which are happening, and steam is also being used in certain products. But what control can be used depends not only upon the product or the environment, but also how long can you keep the product under fumigation. Okay, so just an example of fumigation by methyl bromide, I could give you one example of rice, where I know that there are certain manufacturers who spend 7 days under fumigation and then another 2 days for just resting of that fumigation, and also otherwise, I mean vice versa. And this long duration is required for a product, for a raw material to face this fumigation activity and get free of any residual fumigant, that is this chemical, because these are highly toxic. Okay, and then they have fumes on them. So this is a very highly controlled activity. But since we have agencies and experts who are licensed to do this activity, these are regularly and periodically done in industries which have a huge movement of raw materials and grains. There will be a part where we will be discussing about challenges, but it's important, let me tell you over here, that there are times, like for an example, during this COVID era, there you can very well imagine that there could have been times for industries where they must have dogged a certain amount of raw material of these grains, and then suddenly with the low consumption of products, the consumption of the raw material must have reduced. So where they must have had their frequency or periodic fumigation of this raw material um, for a certain time, let's say it stood for not 7 but for 1 month, then the industry would have to fumigate the entire lot once again. So that's an added cost to this. And also because during fumigation there can be absolutely no movement in that surrounding, so that area can also not be used for anything else. So it's a loss at times. The next, the biggest pest that we can always think of is a rodent. And rodents are filthy, they're obnoxious, not for many other reasons, but also that they are carriers of majority of diseases which are, which can be caused to human beings, and which are deadly. And not only that, as I told you, not only about the health, but also about the asset management. Rodents have proven to be one of the biggest causes of asset loss, because they have this habit of gnawing. Gnawing is the way they bite with the front two teeth, and a huge loss of assets and property has been caused by them by this destruction. And also because of the wires, the electrical wires and all, and these rodents finding a great place to gnaw these plastic and rubber wires, um, they happen to trigger a lot of fire safety hazards, also fire accidents. Electrical fires are what we call them, because of short circuits, etc. And that has caused a huge property loss. So when you're dealing with uh, you know environment safety or electrical safety, even then the rodents are a huge contributor to that kind of destruction. And apart from that, you all know that they are, quite rapid in the movement, and they are the biggest of the organisms in terms of pests that we see. So they can cause the maximum harm. Um, as we saw that they cause damage to buildings and fixtures, they cause damage to machinery, because not everything can be stainless steel. You will have some kinds of plastics or rubbers, or some things that fabric that they can chew, and the moment they chew something, they know something. It's not only the destruction on a property, but also they have infected the product, or the product contact with the huge amount of bacteria and viruses that they have on the saliva. Um, it's also very important to understand that the the rodent droppings that you have are also an attractant to various other pests. So it also happens to be a kind of a cycle with lizards and rodents, that their droppings happen to be attracting to some other kind of crawling and vector pests. All right. The control of rodents involves the elimination of harborage in and around the buildings and preventing access to food, water, and shelter. So over here, it is very important for us to understand that in an industry, it is important to first, mask their entry, and mask any kind of food that can be provided to the rodents. And since they happen to be a larger organism, they need their food and shelter to survive much more than the other pests. Um, for the control of pests, there are various controls now available. We used to have mechanical traps long ago, but recently the mechanical traps have been discouraged, because the way they catch a mouse or a rodent or a rat, uh, you will understand that they have it has a chance to cut off its body parts, like the tails, or hands or the feet. So those could actually be a contaminant to the product being handled in the premises. Um, there are also a requirement of a food bait in these mechanical traps. So if you are placing food baits in the mechanical traps in a place where they are, susceptible for these rodents to come and harbor, then certainly the environment of this place is such that it will start growing other pests on the food baits. So you're not sure that a more rodent would certainly come to a mechanical trap and be caught. Okay, after having that influence of the Tom and Jerry shows that we've seen all our lives. So there could be some rodents who are smart also, but still, the baits that you put up, it could be breads or any other food that you apply to attract these pests, could also be a contaminant for the environment. Okay, and they could be attractant to the other pests, that could venture out a good time around. Um, Also, if you're adding any bait in the form of poison, then that poison also becomes a contaminant. So these mechanical traps used to be a major issue. So these pest controlling activities started designing a procedure of dividing a particular facility into primary, secondary, and tertiary. Okay, so primary areas used to be those areas where the food is being handled directly. The secondary areas used to be the areas which were the gangways, corridors, pathways, movement areas, which were not the food handling areas. And the tertiary areas used to be the areas in the outside periphery. So the mechanical traps found their way out of the primary to the secondary and the tertiary areas. And, you know, um, they were replaced by other methods of catching a rodent, because it was not always advisable to kill a rodent at the site of food handling. So then came the glue pads, and the glue pads basically were that a rodent would come and stick on them. So whenever the pest controlling operators would check for them and they would find them, they can actually remove the entire organism out of the premises, and would not need to kill them. But if you also add granules in the terms of baits, which would be intoxicants, you can actually, catch them, intoxicate them, and then, this in this case, intoxication is done to cause memory loss of the rodent to not find way back into that same place again. So all these methods which are being designed as control are being done by agriculturists and the people who are from from the fields of understanding these organisms, and also the crops and the farms and the food, etc., to understand the biology of these organisms and what exactly can affect the activity of these pests. So a few signs or indications of having rodents around you would be certainly the droppings in the first. And um, with experience and with knowledge, you will see that the droppings of various organisms that you see would be very easily identifiable. And the one thing which I have observed is that, and the difference between the lizard and a rodent dropping is important to understand. See, it is very important that you identify the kind of pest that is causing you trouble, because your action to eliminate any chances of that pest entering your premises is totally depending upon which kind of pest it is. All right. And to identify that, you need to also, foremost, you need to understand the indications of the pest, so which kind of pest it is. And then you can apply any control or, prevention on it. So what we have seen is that the rodent droppings would be a little bigger than the lizard droppings. They would be completely dark gray or black in nature and could be a little harder. And the lizard droppings, on the other hand, would be softer, would be blackish, more blackish, and they would always have a white tip at the end. So this can help you understand that this is a lizard dropping and not a rodent dropping. So, the droppings are one sign. There will always be a squeaking and an unusual noise if you actually have a rodent around you. You will find marks which are called as smears. So there will be these scratching marks on the wall for them to aid them to climb upon the wall, to move around. So they leave blackish marks, and these are called as smears. As I told you that, their chewing is a very big identity of the rodents around. They have a very typical kind of mark that they will leave behind. So if it's fabric or paper, you will find these tiny tidbits around, or if it's a hard plastic or something, then you will find their gnawing marks on the these wires or plastic containers, etc. They will make burrows somewhere nearby wherever they have found food. Okay, and also if you find that if you're finding these rodents more in the night time than in the daytime, because in the daytime they would come more to understand what is where, the geography of the premises. But if you're finding them in the night time, that means they've certainly done their recce in the morning, and now they're back with the population to judge. Uh, the movie Ratatouille will be a great help for all of you to understand the psyche of a rodent. And believe me, I have got a huge help of conducting my audits for pest activity after watching that movie. So then, of course, you will see tracks of the rodents. As I told you, that these are the biggest organism. So you will find them around when there will be powder of flour or spices. So it's just like a thief, how they walk, and you'll find their footsteps on the sand or, marshy areas. Similarly, you will find their feet marked on the walls or on the floors, on the coving, wherever there will be little powder. You'll find those marks of the feet around. So you can track them, you can see there will be a complete track towards the nest. And the biggest identification which you can also see in the supermarkets, etc. If you go little towards the back areas or the office areas, in the biggest of the supermarkets also, you will find that very unique urine odor of the rodents, and that is the biggest identification for the presence of the rodents. So these are a few examples. If you can see the picture, these are the droppings, these are the smears as the black marks on the wall and also on the pipe. So it is very clear that the rodents have been trying to jump on the wall from the pipeline. Okay, this is the gnawing, which is the biting of of a canister. Um, and for the treatment, as I told you, that there will be covered boxes with glue traps. There will be mechanical traps, but these are a little outside of the premises because they can cause, contamination of the premises with this parts of these rodents and their hair. All right. Um, the breeding areas for the rodents would be in the dark areas where you are storing a lot of discarded and dumped packaging material, the storage areas, the areas of the flour and the raw material, grains, etc., pulses, and areas around open drain mouths. Okay, these are the major breeding areas. And also, if you have any pipelines, sanitary plumbing sites where you have open pipelines left, so or any other when you are in an industry, you will find that not everything is working. So some things get out of order, some things are not used. So generally the maintenance department will have the responsibility to phase out these working machinery or a not working breakdown machinery to a separate site. Now for them, a machinery is not working or is out of order, but for the pest, they become like a palace because nobody is coming to check, nobody is cleaning it, nobody is applying water there. They have the best environment of darkness and moisture and nobody troubling. They can get whatever food they are finding around and they can dump it inside that non-working machine and they can consume it. So it is very important to see that if there are any pipelines or sanitary fixtures which will have openings, these are always capped. Okay, in bigger fluid handling industries like oil or milk, what generally happens is the transportation of raw material from outside to inside doesn't happen manually. So they are these big tankers, and they transfer the material, the raw material like oil or milk or even water, into these silos inside the premises through a partial opening within the wall, and that is basically a housing. Okay. Now, if that area is not completely masked from both the sides, because that is a wall, and on the one side is the inside plant, on the other side is the exterior, and the rodents are on the exterior. So if you are not masking that cavity completely, there are full chances of these rodents to come inside the plant. So these are certain incidences how they can enter inside. I've already given you a little understanding about the rodenticides what are being used, um, but certainly they are moving on to a more ecological solutions to all the pest controlling. Cockroaches, again, cockroaches are also nocturnal and they also like darkness and moisture. They also love to come out at night and find out and their shelter and food. The challenge with the cockroaches is that they shelter in places which are hard to reach because they're very tiny and they can start breeding and growing in a very small, minute place. Okay, and the only control or only prevention that can be is to have a proper hygiene in a particular area, because the moment a particular spot becomes high in microbial activity or high humidity, low illumination and the presence of food, moist food, these roaches will find a way to their gala treat. Um, there are various kinds of roaches, and so basically we say roaches, and then there are various kinds of them: the German and American and Oriental. So in industries which I see, that the food industries, etc., you will find majorly the German roaches as a cockroach, and then domestically you will find more of Oriental cockroaches. These are a few examples of the roaches. And again, the problem with the roaches is that they carry the bacteria and the viruses which are very, very deadly for a human being, including Salmonella, Staphylococcus, Listeria, E. coli, and also various parasitic worms and fungi. They would love to, treat themselves on the decaying matter, which means that your waste handling is not proper. All right, in the sewerage, where you have fecal matter, um, from the droppings of, as I told you, that there will be a circle of, the pest movement. So uh, when you have these droppings from rodents and birds, so the roaches will be attracted towards them. Dead animals. So dead animals will give you an idea about the slaughterhouses. So these are where they can be grown, they can be found. A great deal of time. And the concern is that they defecate along their pathways. So they absolutely have a very negligible size of a stomach. So they keep defecating, and then they keep eating that waste. All right. And the one characteristic which is very deadly with the roach, what makes it a cockroach, is that they will keep spitting on a surface. Okay, they spit on a surface. They don't have tongues. Okay, so they will spit on a surface to taste the environment, that can they breathe there or not. Okay, and that saliva, that chemical that they spit on you, is a huge toxin that can make you fall sick, and contains all these bacteria that have been listed above. Um, their their own droppings and their the secretions from their body, they leave some highly tainting chemicals, and can they can taint the prepared foods also, and as well as raw materials and ingredients also. um, they they also are a part of a life cycle where they keep changing their identity, and that is also a concern, because they can cast their skin, and they lay eggs. So all these stances of a particular roach cycle can exist together. All right. Also, another important feature of a roach, that the skin that they cast contains a lot of allergens in them. So there are people who could be allergic to this airborne, you know, uh, uh, hormones of these casted skin by the roaches. All right, and if an area is highly affected or infected by roaches, there are groups of population who have shown their symptoms to be, positive for asthma. Um, it's a huge paragraph, but then let me tell you that a good sanitation practice is the only thing that can help you prevent roaches building up in your premises. A good illumination, a proper cleaning program has been good enough to screen out the roaches, and this is what I have seen in as my experience, that of course chemicals work. Chemical will work to diminish the current population of the roaches in a particular area. But then, increasing the illumination, um, deodorizing a particular area, and avoiding any moisture, controlling moisture in a place, can be a highly effective method of keeping the roaches away. All right. Apart from that, it is very important to maintain the repair status of a building, or I should say, condition of the infrastructure. You're not supposed to have any areas where the waste is standing, or where the drains are open, the sewage is open. The drains are there proper, but then the drain holes are big. The slope of the floor is not correct. The coving is not there. There are damages in the ceiling, in the floor, or in the wall, where now you have to understand that what is wrong with the and what is the connection, what is wrong and what is the connection between the pest activity or a roach activity with the condition of the floors. Most importantly, you see that whenever there is a grouting between the tiles and the grooves and damages on the floor tiles, what happens when you are cleaning that area? Whenever you are cleaning an area, either you're using a broom or you are using a mop to clean. You could be doing just a dry mopping, or you could be doing a wet mopping by flushing in water and then wiping it off. What will happen basically with the grooves and the groutings is that all the dirt that you were starting to collect from the starting point to take them to the end point and be collected, all this dirt is depositing in these crevices, grooves, and groutings. So these pits happen to be the location of the breeding of these roaches. And that is why the maintenance of a building, of an infrastructure, becomes a huge triggering factor for the growth of the roaches. And we have seen in practicality that the moment the infrastructure is done good, the instances of the roaches, they go down immediately. Also, as I said, that the cleaning programs have to be good. Now, what happens is sometimes, if due to lack of understanding, uh, people do fogging in the enclosed areas of drains, etc., or ducting to kill the roaches. Now, roaches, like any other organism, they will have at least that much of an understanding that if something is coming to kill them, they will rush beyond, right? Now, if you're finding death around you, you will really run. That is what these roaches do. So when you are fogging a complete drain or a duct, these roaches will tend to come out of whatever hole they find, and then they will spread around a certain area to save themselves in self-defense. And that is the biggest mistake, because the ones that will stay alive, or they survive this attack, they will find newer places and start growing their colonies. So collecting a gush of population on fogging becomes very important. So this is also, these are some controls or care that needs to be taken during pest control to to capture a negative effect of an activity. All right. So you will find that the signs of having had a roach in the premises uh, will be the fecal droppings, like casings, odor, roaches during the day, and dead roaches, as I told you. These are some instances. These are some treatments of gels. Gels have found to be most effective towards the cockroach control, and these are their breeding areas. And as you see this, the last picture where you'll find those hidden areas where they will grow, then you will have flies. Now, fly is something which is needless to explain. They carry the germs, bacteria, and the pathogens from waste and garb, and then they come to the food processing area and they will land it up onto the food contact surfaces, food, and also on the people. And when people get affected, they affect the other people as well. And food is something where they get their nutrition from. So I'm rushing because this is something which we all understand very well. And flies are a huge carrier. So fly is a basically concern, is an organism of concern, because it carries over 100 pathogens in their stomach. And even the flies, just like roaches, have very tiny stomachs, so they cannot keep on eating. So they will, whatever they have eaten, they will first vomit it out and then they will eat more. So this spitting or vomit is something that contains again Salmonella, cholera, Shigella, Campylobacter, coliforms, Cryptosporidium, and parasites also. So this is what can cause a concern. Now there are certain fruit flies which will have a certain distinct characteristic of taking protein supplies to breed and to create their eggs, to form eggs, to produce eggs. And this can be a huge issue for the fruits because they can pinch in this this saliva or this activity, and there will be a pathway for these bacteria to get inside the fruits. So the food processing facilities can provide an attractive area of suitable substrates for flies if hygienic practices are not adequate. So your waste, your sewage, your collection of residues, all these can be a major substrate for the flies. Then you have drain flies. Now drain flies are an indication that you have somewhere a drain which is clogged, or you somewhere you have stagnant water. So whenever you find drain flies, immediately you have to understand that there is somewhere water being stagnant somewhere. Um, the controlling of the flies could be done by various methods, just like having good manufacturing practices in place, as we discussed about rodents also. Apart from that, it is important that you prevent the flies from coming in. The difference between rodents and the flies and the roaches would be that the movement of the flies is much uncontrolled than the roaches and the rodents, who are the crawlers. Here you cannot track the 3D movement of a vector, of a fly. So it is important that you prevent them from coming in than to eliminating them. Okay. So these are a few examples of open shutters, gaps in windows. A major issue happens with the exhaust fans because many times you will not understand that exhaust needs a flap outside, because as long as the exhausts are working, the blades screen the outside from the inside. But the moment exhaust fans are switched off, it becomes a complete hole for everything to come inside the processing plants. You can have you used to have fly cutters, and now also we have this electric matrix which can kill flies by shattering them. Okay, and this is a problem because by shattering these flies, they can drop into the food or the food contact or even the packaging material. So it's important that you trap the flies and not just kill them. Okay, not just cut them, insecticide them. So now we have a development of having glue pads behind these UV lights, which can actually fluorescent tubes, which can attract them and keep them stuck. And when they are stuck, they have no nutrition, no air, they will die themselves. And these pads with these dead flies can be discarded. Okay, and these are the reasons and the breeding areas, as you can see on your rightmost. Then comes birds. Now, birds could be, birds could be organisms, but birds could be pests, when they are contaminating your areas of raw material. So if you have a huge dal plant or a pulse plant where you are sun drying, a polished dal, then all these birds which are on the outside periphery, they would come and tug on it. This chugging of the pests can cause, foodborne diseases by the spitting of salmonella, etc. Apart from the oral or a buccal interaction of the food with the pests for the birds' beaks, the droppings are also major, factory of these bacteria, foodborne pathogen bacteria. Um, Pigeon, for that matter, having the huge amount of salmonella in them. And evidences have been seen that wherever the area is infested with pigeon dropping, the environment has shown by swab testing positive of a huge amount of salmonella colonies. So for pest control, it is very important that you understand that there has to be a strategy designed to control the pest, and not a chemical can just help. All right, it is very important that you identify the pests first, because the controls will be very subjective and very specific to the kind of pests that you have. A few questions that you can ask for monitoring is: what kind of pests are present? What is the number which is great enough to warrant any kind of control? Can they be done with the proper physical control, or they need some biological or chemical control? What is the right time to begin the control? And have the control effort successfully reduced the number of pests, or should you need to change your strategy? Which makes leads you to the second step, to understand that pest control is an obsolete term now. It's a very old term. We have stopped using it, and now we call it as a pest management. Why? Because we have to understand that you will have to control a pest only when it has bred to a certain extent and level. So the most important activity will be to prevent any pest from having an ingress in your premises. So a bigger, just like you will have HACCP and TACCP and VACCP to ensure so much advanced techniques of food safety. Similarly, in pest control, it is important that you should prevent a pest from entering an area rather than killing or eliminating it later on, because that will include some chemicals or effort, which is an over and above effort, which will include investment also and will harm the ecology also. So this is called as integrated pest management, which talks about implementing a strategy that reduces the pests, their interaction between each other. As I told you, that the droppings will attract smaller pests also from the larger organism, and they're harming or breeding around or harborage in a certain area. Okay. Um, when I talk about IPM, it talks about exclusion first. How do you physically exclude? How do you proof a premises? Then the restriction, that is removal of elements within the premises that will attract these pests. If that has also been surpassed and the pest has actually gotten inside, then you talk about destruction, and then monitoring the activity that is destroying these pests. This basically you can understand as a 4D process. The first D is deny entry. Second D is deny shelter. So first to deny entry by having a good manufacturing practice, by having a good infrastructure, seal all holes, seal all crevices, don't let anything damage in your premises, don't leave any open holes or pipeline outside which are coming inside, and then deny the shelter. So if you actually find if any pest has found a way inside the premises, you should deny them shelter. There should not be any condition for them to harbor. Then if in case that has also happened, they have come inside and they found a place to stay, you have to deny food. The third D is deny food, which is do not provide them any anything as nutrition. So having complete food handling within pipelines, automatic handling, everything covered, like covered bins, covered containers, airtight covered bins and containers, even the sampling being done by small holes, so that you do not have to open the entire containers to sample your food products within in process. So all these can be there to deny food. Then comes the fourth D, which is destruction, which talks about eradication of these pests. Okay, now the 7 tips in general to prevent infestation of any kind of pests will be to keep your waste bins and waste receptacles to always covered. Okay, that means they should never get overfull, and when you buy them there itself, you have to get this confusion cleared, that the bins with the lids which swivel on the tops are also a kind of open bins. um, Clean up any kind of residue or spills of food products around, so that cleaning has to be very rapid and quick and effective. Keep your food or liquid or beverage always covered. Keep all your windows, pipeline fixtures always closed and screened. Any holes, cracks, or crevices of grouting have to be completely sealed. If you have any any hazard from the flying insects, to control them completely with something that can be caught and disposed. And then all the susceptible material of holding or storage should be completely cleaned and disinfected in the spring cleanings overnight or in a deep cleaning method. Okay, so these are basically the control that we have discussed recently in the natural controls. by climate, natural enemies, geographical barriers, food and water supply, the shelter needs to be controlled. When we talk about applied controls, it talks about the host resistance. Okay, biological controls, mechanical control was the kind of devices that we use. Sanitation means good cleaning. Chemical control means using of chemicals, which should be the fourth D, using the chemical to kill them, the pests. In biological control, basically, there have been advances, and what they do now is they are creating baits and medicines like, hormones from organisms like pheromones and chiromones. What they do is they attract these pests as a normal biological activity, and they get trapped to be killed. For the host resistance, the repellent chemicals are found in the hosts. More tolerant host can be the one resisting it, and the host has difficult physical characteristics to be removed. Importantly, the challenges which are faced by the industry in terms of pests is the resistance of the pest.
Sir, sorry to interrupt, but we are just running out of time.
All right, Jenna. So I would just, what I would do is, I think we may be having questions on these topics. I would just briefly tell them that, the challenges that the industry is facing is the resistance of, the pest to a certain chemical because it has been exposed too long. The improper equipment and facility design so that the areas cannot be cleaned properly. There are too mucked up and too clogged up to have proper incidents cited. Poor record keeping of the activities, so the people who are managing this activity within the plants, they're not able to analyze the factors and they're not able to take action on them. Then the very important point is that this is basically, this is agriculture, understanding of pests and their activities. And all of us, including I, we do not have that kind of basic knowledge from our curriculum or our activities to learn totally about the biology of these pests. So somewhere the lack of awareness of the pest controlling and the pests somewhere leads to inadequate actions or inadequate monitoring and control over the pest harborage. So the next, basically, I can share this later on also as a document where I was telling you where and what is mentioned by the FSSAI about pest control and pest control recording, which talks about the records and documents to be maintained by them, by every industry, and what are the kind of requisites. The last point which I was making was the kind of pest control documentation that each industry needs to have, which talks about a valid pest control contract. Each pest controlling agency has to be licensed. It has been mentioned by the Food Safety Authority and also the national authorities of other countries where you cannot do your pest controlling yourself. You have to hire an expertise for doing this activity. The pest controlling authority or the body needs to have a proper schedule and record based on the effectiveness, based on the incidences of the premises. There has to be a list of chemicals that they will be using at the premises, and these chemicals must be manufactured also by licensed agencies. And the operating agency should have adequate documentation from the manufacturing agency. Here, manufacturing agency means chemical manufacturing agency. Then they should have proper mapping of whatever baits they are putting up in the entire premises. And they should also analyze the trend of the pests they are catching regularly. And all these people who are operating the pests or activity in a premises need to be trained in food safety and hygiene and should be medically fit. Otherwise, they would be one reason of spreading diseases. And all records should be updated and verified. So it's important to understand that this pest occurrence or control is the responsibility of the process owners in a particular area in the premises and the workforce involved. All right, in the operations, in those factories, in those industry, and the pest control operators are there to just clean up the trouble that you have created in your processes by you. All right. So thank you very much. And We did have a little content there which we rushed up. So if there are any questions, we can now deal with them in the questions and which Mr. Amit with us around. Thank you, Charna.
As rightly said, pest control is important as pests can be both a nuisance and a danger to health. Thank you, sir, for your willingness to share your time and experience today. We move ahead with panel discussion and our panelists are Dr. Sundar Kataria, Mr. Sumit Saxena, Mr. Amit Lohar, and Mr. Anand Pal Singh. Please put in your questions in the chat box which shall be taken up during the discussion. A brief introduction of Mr. Amit Lohar. He is the Manager Quality Assurance at Western Drug
Mansiram,
Limited.
your voice is too
He's
low.
done his BSc Chemistry, MSc in Polymer Chemistry, MBA in Total Quality. Hello, is it okay now? Mr. Amit Lohar
Yes,
is the
yes.
Manager Quality Assurance at Western Drugs Limited. He's done his BSc Chemistry, MSc Polymer Chemistry. He's done his MBA in Total Quality Management, TQM. He is an experienced quality assurance specialist in the field of pharmaceutical, food, feed, and cosmetic industries. He is a qualified lead auditor for BRCGS for Food Safety Issue 08. He is an approved preventive control qualified individual for FSPCA preventive control for human foods, which ensures safe manufacturing, processing, packaging, and holding of human foods. He is a qualified internal quality auditor for ISO 9000. Please welcome Mr. Amit Lohar. Mr. Anand Palsi. He is the
I am.
Regional Manager North for International Certification Services Private Limited. He's done his BE Mechanical. He's qualified engineers for helicopter airframe and engines for repair and second line maintenance of alloy aircraft and the associated equipments. He's a qualified engineer for hydraulic trolley ground power unit DG set. He's done his elementary courses in casualty, firefighting, crash and civil defense from Civil Defense Staff College, Mumbai. He is a lead auditor for ISO 9000, 14000, 45000, 50001, 13485, SA 8000 and 27000. Please welcome Mr. Anand Pal Singh. Over to you, sir, for panel discussion.
Hello, Dr. Kataria.
Anandji, unmute yourself. Anandji, unmute yourself. Dr. Kataria, unmute yourself. Yeah. First of all, I thanks and I'm glad to welcome Mr. Sumit Saxena, our keynote, who have presented about pest control in a very efficient and in a very exemplary manner. Yes, it was a constraint of time, but I was also not wanting you to stop in between. And so we thank you to be here and explaining in such a wonderful manner about the pest control, which is a very key issue for the food industry. I also welcome Mr. Amit Lahore, who is another professional as a quality manager and in Western Drug Limited, and certainly the bank of knowledge and our mentor, Dr. Sundar Kataria, on this panel discussion. I would like to hear something from Mr. Amit Lohar on this subject so that we can start this discussion further.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Kataria and the whole team of ICS to for inviting me as a panelist. And Mr. Sumit, the presentation was very good, very nice. and the session was very informative, and definitely it will help to all the food safety personnel. And personally, I like it very much. And definitely, if there is some issues from any participant, then definitely we will guide them. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Anand. Thank you, and nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sumit ji, you have very well explained everything. There's no place to have a questions now. But still, there is one question which is generally arising, and in your presentation, it was also there, that we must know what is pest control. But in industry, the user, the operator, the supervisor, he is just rest assured on the agency who is hired on the pest control. So he is not aware. So what do you
Yes.
want to say in that?
Mr. Singh, it is a very common observation where even as an auditor, when you visit a plant and you visit a hotel, a plant or a retail area, wherever, and you tend to find a pest activity somewhere which should not have been. The first action which an auditor or any food safety expert, Mr. Lohar, will agree is, they would want to understand the root cause with the activities taking place there. But what we find on the contrary is that pest control wale ko bulao. Call up the pest control fellow. And I have made sure in the past 10 years at least that, I make sure that they do not do this. I tell them there and then that this is a lacuna of the owners, as in my pun statement in the last slide of thank you, where I tell them that any pest activity is your responsibility, is what you have caused, and any action that the pest controller will do will be to control your mess. So I would say, Mr. Singh, is that as a food safety contributor, as quality assurance managers or people in the production or quality assurance, the professionals who are attending this session today should take an opportunity to understand that they should increase the number of trainings of pest management for all the staff, and they should do mock examinations of the conditions that are arising in the area of activity, take pictures, show it to the top management. And what I have suggested in the past a few sites is that the quality assurance managers to take those pictures and map them as a comparative with the pest control records of the pest controllers, and tell the top management that it is hardly what a pest controller can do if people are not cleaning up their spaces well and if they're not removing the waste from their areas. So I think, Mr. Singh, to sum it up, training, regular assessment of the areas, and most importantly, reporting to the top management is very important as a responsibility of the food safety contributor. On the other side also, when the purchase of the materials department is having a contract with the pest controller, the day they start their job, it is an imperative action to be taken that a direct contact be established between the operator and the top management. So if they find some lacuna or obstruction, they can directly report to the top management regarding the same.
Absolutely. Dr. Kataria has a long, very experience into auditing into food safety. This pest control is again, I have seen while being with him doing audit, a lot of concern with various things with regard to pest control. Sir, we would like to hear from your side.
Yeah, welcome Sumit ji and Mr. Lahore. It is a nice, and Sumit ji has really explained it so well. Means he has covered all the aspects, and I do agree with Sumit ji that when we go for audit almost 20 years now, when we go to food industries, very little focus by the top management on this pest control. As a ritual, okay, we have to have pest control agency. And now when they select it, I don't think they put so much effort to select the right company. Second thing, as Sumit sir has told, he basically you are looking for pest control. You are not looking for pest control management. And this is outsourced activities. Now, outsourced activities, many times we fail to understand who is the responsible person in the organization, who is controlling it, who is seeing the report. We have seen the report, it is just visit by pest control. There is no detail how many pests they found, how many rodent they found, what chemical they use. There are a lot of things which plays into, which I liked it. It has to be management, pest control management is most important. From pest control, we should move to management system. There should be procedure, there should be system and all these things. Because when I looked into it, there are a lot of things which are placed. Second thing, I have not seen even a single organization who has focused this, that HACCP also controls, identifies what are the chemicals they are using and what are the CCP in that also. Because we leave a lot of residue of the pest controls, maybe, which is hazardous for the food industry. With that, I emphasize that we have to have good management system, and auditors should also focus that they look into it very thoroughly. Mr. Lahore, he will agree with me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And there is generally, whenever we go for the regulatory requirement, the pest control is not seen to be a regulatory requirement, rather it is a pesticide, which is very confusing to the user. Because when it is, if it is directly requirement, in case in US or various other countries, there are specifically they are saying that pest control is a regulatory requirement. What is your view on all this? Yeah.
Okay.
Saxena ji.
Okay. So I think, to be honest, I think we are developing our requirements on the same. The legislative and the regulatory requirements are developing slowly, and the problem here is, Mr. Singh, that somewhere we have to understand the polity also behind it. The politics says that it is a different ministry altogether. So just like farming has not been a part of FSSAI, similarly, it is also a Ministry of Agriculture. And, and the pest controlling happens to be a part controlled by the Ministry of Agriculture, not Family and Health Welfare. So somewhere that has been a little, what part of it can they take, what part of it can they regularize? So I think international standards, when you implement, like when we, whatever audience we have here certified by ICS would know the difference between being certified and non-certified in majorly in pest control and hygienic activities. However, there, as I showed in the FSSAI, there are interpretations of the Schedule 4 Part 2 that talks about, if it is not a legislative requirement or a regulatory requirement, but it is certainly a regulated activity. So when a business has to implement food safety, they will take care of the pest controlling activity as a regulated legislative activity. तो वो ये नहीं बोल रहे डायरेक्टली कि आपके लिए ये रेगुलेटरी रिक्वायरमेंट है, वो ये बोल रहे हैं कि आपको करवाना तो है ही, एंड आपको जिससे करवाना है, जो करवाना है, that has to fall under the a paraphrase of a regulated activity. तो थोड़ा सा इंटरप्रिटेशन यहाँ पे मिस्टर सिंह हमको लेना पड़ेगा, एंड थोड़ा सा समय का अभाव था, so I could not run you very closely to the slides, but I have those statements mentioned where FSSAI talks about the pest management to be a regulated activity by a regulatory or a authorized agency.
True, very true. And
Yeah.
it is the professional's responsibility to explain it. Yes, Dr. Kataria, sir.
Yeah, I will continue with this, what Mr. Sumit says, that if you see our FSSAI Food Act as well as FSSAI, there is a Food Act in clause 21. It is clearly saying pesticides, veterinary, drug residue, then antibiotics residue, and the microbiological count is covered under that one.
Yes.
And
Article 21.
the organization has to also take care of recognized accreditation laboratories where he is using
Yes.
testing the residue.
Yes.
Also, they should cover the rule number 44, recognition organization agency for the safety audit, food safety audit.
Yes.
That is important. Now here, if you say indirectly, we have the act on the insecticide act, which comes from the Ministry of your Agriculture. There's 1968. That has to be followed.
Yes.
And they have
Yes.
revised it time to time. In
And
71 also.
As Dr. Kataria is saying, or Mr. Singh, whenever we are doing this FSSAI third-party audits, now, if you understand this link here, so now FSSAI's third-party audit is a mandatory requirement. In that, we check
Yes.
pest controlling activity to be a regulatory activity, an activity which is controlled and should be conducted by an authorized agency. So this is automatically, has brought in into, as a regulation, I should say.
Very
So,
correct. Very
And
correct.
now they have also bought taxology that is important in the Food Act. Plus, they have also allergen. These two
yes.
indirectly also covers your use of the pest control.
Yes, sir.
So
There is one question which it is there by the viewer that since use of chemical as pest management may be a possible threat to maintain quality of organic produce, is it a good option to use organic pesticide in food processing industries?
Should
Yeah,
Ah,
Amit ji or
um,
Satyana ji, whosoever can
Yeah,
answer.
it's also a good option, but at present most of the industries are using only the synthetic chemicals, and they are under the scope of that pest control agency only. But nowadays, I have also seen some organic chemicals that are available in the markets. So basically, industry should be aware of this. So in future, maybe there will be a use of this type of organic chemicals. But at present, in our industry also, we are using the synthetic chemicals only to control the pest.
uh, there is
Yeah,
a
um,
huge scope and a huge market which is available for the upscaling of such chemicals, because there are various products which are still lying to be certified as organic. They cannot be because the extensive amount of pest susceptibility that they have. So
Right.
there have to be businesses that have to upscale their production of organic chemicals. They can certainly be costlier. But also, if you see the slides, there could be other methods like biological methods that can be developed. If you don't want to dump the chemical residues in the ecology, you can also develop biological. But again, as Mr. Dr. Kataria certainly, very well said that, we need to have that push for the entrepreneurs to work and think on this field. Yes, I and Mr. Lohar are also one of those, but yes, there should be more of them. I think a lot of students have joined us today, and we need to understand that all this is food technology only. It is not moving out of food technology that you will be providing some supportive chemicals and support system to the industry to grow.
apart from that, is also responded to a regulatory body. If you see schedule of chemicals, there are about number of chemicals are there. Big list
Yeah.
is there.
Yeah,
But unfortunately, I don't find anywhere the organic they have shown
yes.
Yes.
anything, because they had to also play according to modern system. They have to also move upgrade their regulation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are actually short running of time. I thank Sumit Saxena ji to giving us a very detailed about the pest, what kind of the pest is, how we have to find it, where they can go harm to the food, to the person, and the controls even. And we thank Mr. Amit Lahore also to be as a panelist for sharing his views. And as usual, Dr. Kataria, a bank of knowledge. He has been a lot of experience into various industries. And we thank all our viewers who are there with us every week on this day to share our knowledge. Thank you. Over to Mansi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all the panelists for the valuable contributions and a great discussion held today for today's topic. We move ahead. ICS is pleased to provide you all its research and development. We have published books into integrated management systems, QMS, CMS, and OSHAs, excellence in education management, ISO made easy in Gujarati, Marathi, Telugu, and Hindi. You can contact Ms. Sushma Kindalkar on 93800202219 for these books. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. Please register on our website www.sadgunsang.org and give your feedback. You can also get the updates on the past and the upcoming webinars in your login page. Thank you for being part of the Sadgun Sang on pest control. With this, we close today's ceremony. Wish you all a very happy weekend.